Wow, it's like huge in here. This is awesome. Thanks ever so much for everyone coming. I'm Dan. I'm the Director of Partnerships for Protect Our Winters in Europe. We work increasingly with creatives, scientists, and most importantly, athletes to communicate our challenges on climate and on environmentalism. We're seeing here a huge change in the way that athletes are being used to create that positive change in the world, being used by NGOs like ourselves, but also by brands in the outdoor industry. And today we've managed to put together a panel of athletes and brands that are the real leading edge of this. If I start with the intros from this side, we've got David Bain. David has made the transition from professional athlete to working within the outdoor sports industry. He's now commercial director of Piranha and NRS Europe. We've got Gillian Roche, who's from Pitcher Organic Clothing. Pitcher are renowned for their sustainability and purpose-led business model and the way they use athletes to tell stories that follow their values and purpose. We've got Elias Elhardt, who has made the transition from X Games competitor to filming parts in movies as one of the most creative backcountry snowboarders that you'll see, to creating his own stories that communicate his purpose, and now finally made the step into political advocacy, where he's working with POW alongside that. And at the end, we've got Manon Carpenter, ex-downhill mountain bike world champion, now environmental storyteller and political advocate as well. So fantastic panel that we've got here today. I don't know if you want to give them a super quick clap for coming. I think what I'm really interested in to kick this off is we see a lot of sort of high-level talk about purpose and how brands can use athletes to portray their values. But what I really want to do here is step into actual specifics about how brands and athletes are doing this and hopefully create some inspiration for businesses in the room to do the same thing. So we just start with the athletes first. Elias, do you want to give us a run-over of perhaps one of the latest projects you've been working on?
Yeah, great to be here. So like you said, I come from sort of the performance-based snowboarding to then storytelling through films. And now the last thing I've done, actually together with POW, is Climate Dialogue on the Mountain, where we bring leading politicians to the mountain, to the outdoors, to talk about their climate policy from very different directions. And we've done this just ahead of the Bavaria election. The top politicians from Bavaria were up there. We were in the evening news. We had quite a significant impact, sort of as far as the spotlight goes to the subject matter, which we really wanted, but also that the politicians, they kind of got out of their everyday warfare of trenches between ideologies, but really could talk about the subject matter from sort of a different elevation. And I think it was a really cool first event, and we want to have this as a format.
So we've got athletes directly communicating with politicians, using their level of influence, not just through media, but face-to-face with politicians as well. And Manon, what's your latest project that you've been on?
Yeah, so in the last year, I'm lucky enough to have a platform that I can use and opportunities to tell stories within my sports. And recently, that's moving into stories that link with environmental and climate issues that the sport is being impacted by. So in the last year, we've been putting together a film called Winds of Change, and this film followed the impact of Storm Arwen and the subsequent storms that hit really severely the northeast of the UK in 2021. And following the impact that this had on communities that used the forests that were completely flattened in this storm, and kind of using that story to tell both the impact that climate is having on our environment and how this is affecting people in a way that's really personal to them. And I found that it's really been able to connect with people in that way, so using the sport that they really care about and the places they care about to engage with these wider topics. And off the back of that, we've been able to host different film screenings where we've had Protect Our Winters and other NGOs, Trash Free Trails, and local organizations come and talk to local communities, show the film, talk about those topics, and really try and engage with people as much as we can. And we've also been able to run a fundraiser off the back of that. So really trying to use yeah, I kind of really like being able to use the platform that I've had to talk about issues that I really care about and engage people in the places we really care about to do good.
So engagement through film as well, that's sort of more at a distance engagement too for the wider audience. And from the brand point of view, Gillian, do you want to tell us about a project that Pitcher's been involved in recently, supporting athletes in this way?
Yeah, so obviously we work with a lot of athletes, and our athletes come to us with various projects. And one of the most recent and cool projects that I find is this film project called Beyond the Green Veil. And it's from 3 picture athletes based in North America, and they're looking at Vancouver Island. And they looked at this space both in terms of how they use it for mountain biking, for hiking, for skiing, so for our outdoor recreation, but also how it's used for industrial processes for logging and how we reckon with both of those. So that's a really cool project that we're supporting at Picture.
And from the water sports world as well, David, what's the project that you're supporting at the moment?
So whilst continuing the project we have kind of longer term commitments for in the Balkans and the Alps, a new project is actually one in Iceland on the East Glacial River. Now we have an ambassador called Ben Rowlands, who is a kayaker and a guide out there, and he's connected all of the local river users, be it fly fishing, kayaking or rafting, as well as the local companies and any stakeholders in the area to get them behind protecting this river. Now it's under some serious threat from hydro dams that are looking to destroy, most of the river actually. So he's getting, not just him and the extreme kayakers involved and who we would consider ambassadors of our sport, but getting the entire river community behind this and obviously then utilizing our wider platform as a brand to then get it out to the masses and why we should protect this river.
And I'm interested from a brand point of view, are these projects that you're presenting or are these projects that athletes are bringing to you?
Go ahead.
I mean, I think when we get to work on a Monday morning, there's always more than just looking for ambassadors and stuff like that. So we tend to look towards some of our longer NGO partners to give us the advice of where our money's best valued. One in particular is called the Free Rivers Fund, and they work with a load of different people and offer grants each year to grassroots individuals and NGOs that are working to protect a local river. And we put our trust in them to help guide us where the money is best spent to have the most amount of impact.
Yeah, our athletes come to us. That doesn't mean we're hands off, doesn't mean we don't involve ourselves with projects, but they come up with the idea, they present to us, we see how we can collaborate with them.
And when it comes to that speaking up and that using your voice, Elias, what obstacles have you found in your way? What has blocked you or what blocks other athletes in taking part?
Well, I think first off, you're going to contradict yourself with the lifestyle you're representing. Maybe you're representing a brand. So if you talk about environmental topics, you will run into contradictions very easily. So maybe you will see criticism, hypocrisy thrown at you. That's one thing. The other thing is it takes up a lot of capacity, so it takes up a lot of time. So I think this is just sort of the reality if you step up, if you do try and get into difficult questions and engage in them.
And have you noticed that change, Manon, those obstacles, as you've gone from like a competitive racer through your career? Have you noticed those obstacles changing, getting better, getting worse?
I think maybe more so going from being first and foremost a competitive racer to where I am now, a few years later, having kind of dived into these topics more. I think it's been a learning curve of how to deal with talking about a topic that's outside your sport, so that's what you know first and foremost, but there's a learning process being introduced to and understanding the different environmental issues and learning how to talk about that, and I think we'll come on to it. I've had guidance and help in learning how to better communicate on those topics, and you get, if you open up topics, environmental or climate, to an online audience, for example, you can get all sorts of comments back and kind of knowing how to deal with that because you kind of have so many people who can interact with you. So yeah, I think learning, and as Elias said, when you're international sport involves travel and involves product, and you do have that feeling of hypocrisy. And I know that athletes now still competing, they also feel that, and it's a barrier to them talking about issues they care about, talking about climate. And I think there's also a learning curve that, yes, there's individual impacts, we know that, and there's self-reflection there that's needed, but there's also these much wider changes that are needed, and the platform that we can have as athletes and brands to voice those topics more and spread awareness, I think that's, it's important to use that rather than feel like you can't speak because of, yeah.
Yeah, maybe to add to this, so the first film I've done myself where I've brought the idea to life was called Contra-Addiction. So I wanted to focus on that very contradiction that I'm going to talk about. In a consumer sport like snowboarding, you have to go to the places. A sport where you grow older and it's entitled to eternal youth, carefreeness, and then how to take responsibility within that space. So I think it really found great resonance. It was incredible, like how many people could relate to it and how little criticism it really got in a way, because it was just being very honest and open. And it was addressing a question that most people had to themselves. And that was a really good experience, that people are really open to this. And they just want transparency, and then they're willing to go beyond that. It shouldn't stop at being contradicting yourself, but to take that as a starting point, to take that as a motivation, to say, okay, let's see, what can I change? First off, being honest, and then what can I change?
It's interesting that Manon's picked up there like specific training support. I mean, that's through Patagonia. I know they do a lot of work with sort of media training and things. Julian, how does Picture work in that way with its athletes and support?
So we've heard from a lot of our athletes that even though they're environmentally and socially aware, and a lot of them are working on really cool projects related on that, they still have this feeling of, I'm not expert enough to speak out on that. We're still getting that comment. And we want to move past that comment. So 2 weeks ago, this is very recent, the team manager, myself, and the sustainability manager at Picture, we decided to start an open forum for all of our athletes. So sometime before the end of the year, we're going to have a 2-hour session where, we're going to speak about hard topics. We're going to speak about confronting topics. There'll be a bit of learning in there, educating on like what's actually happening to our planet, to our people, so that all of our athletes feel comfortable talking about it and that they know what's going on and what they can and cannot share. Yeah.
And how does that work, again, in the water sports world? Support that you give to your athletes or to the NGOs that work with your athletes?
I think being able to talk internally openly allows you to then have the confidence to talk externally. And certainly internally, I find myself incredibly fortunate to be in a company that all of my colleagues are also paddlers. Now, this means that our ambassadors know this. They know that we're kayakers ourselves, so they feel that they can give us a call anytime and talk to us as somebody that understands what they're going through and also cares. And there's another part to that in actions speak louder than words. If as a company we're communicating the values that we deem to be true and we deem to be important, that also gives our athletes the confidence that this is a message that they can communicate as well. I think if all we were communicating was the big sending of waterfalls and the extreme side of our sport, or even just the commercial side of our sport, then for our ambassadors to stray away from that seems like a change. If as a company we're talking about the community and environmental objectives and kind of visions that we have, this allows our athletes to follow suit with confidence.
And I think also if athletes feel confident to communicate to their audience, they also feel confident to come back and challenge us as a brand, which is something that I really want to hear and that you do all the time, and I love it. But then it's a moment for us to reflect, and if all of our athletes are doing that and we're doing it back to our athletes, we're only going to get stronger.
When you're talking about that sort of, all of us are in from the same sports background, or we are aligned on those values, do you specifically choose your ambassador program or choose the athletes you want to support based on their values and their willingness to use their voice?
I think initially we've been doing this subconsciously for a long time, choosing the ambassadors who we believe represent the values of the business. But more recently, we've actually transitioned our athlete program to be two separate programs. A program that we call Lead, and then having athletes alongside. And definitely the Lead program has been where actually most of the investment now goes. So we're actively opening up the conversation for if you're a community champion or if you've got an environmental project that you believe in, we're the people to come and talk to, and we want to support you in that goal. So yeah, I think for a long time it maybe was subconscious. Now it's much more conscious, and communicating that externally has allowed us to bring more people in with those goals.
And how about if we just turn it around a bit? Would you reject athletes based on values, behavior? You know, how would Pitcher view something like that?
Yeah, we reject people if they work with motorized sports to get out into the backcountry. So someone who snowmobiles to get out there, we don't work with them. We don't work with people who are also supported by energy drinks, which makes it really challenging and really hard to work with North American athletes, but those are our two red lines. Otherwise, if someone's a bit in a gray area, it becomes an internal discussion, and the internal discussion is, do we have an opportunity to educate this person and empower them to lean more into this environmental and social values that they may be starting to show?
And from an athlete point of view, I don't know who wants to pick it up first, but do you pick and choose, or would you choose your brand sponsors? I mean, you're both at a level in your careers where I imagine you have more opportunities of choice. Would you choose your sponsors or supporters around the way their values align with yours?
Yeah, so for me in the racing days, I think it's, I think there's the brands that are available to work with, and I was for some years sponsored by an energy drink, and in the end once I finished racing, I ended that because it had kind of made some kind of sense when I was racing, but it really didn't make sense to me afterwards. And in more recent years, I've definitely aligned intentionally with the brands that I align with and respect their values, and that's something I've been able to do since, and I feel in the best place I've been and the most comfortable I've been in those relationships, and I think it's a really strong relationship for that having values that align, I think that is really important.
Yeah, same for me. It's interesting because I think we've just seen it change so much. When I was growing up, the biggest thing was to have, say, a brand of a energy drink or something on your head, and now it's not anymore. I think the time has changed. All the brands we're seeing are taking a stand, have to take a stand. Kids growing up are much more politicized, and I think that's interesting to see all around. And for me, that also means I'm not just an athlete sort of doing crazy things and performing, but I'm also going to communicate a certain set of values that I share with the brand that I'm with. So it's a big decision for me, and why am I communicating? Because I'm the face to the outside. That's why they have sort of athletes, ambassadors. They need faces to represent them, and it's not only the sport, but it's also values. And so I think it's really, really, really crucial to understand what these values are that you want to communicate and how they can mix and how they can fit together. And then you can really create something amazing. Like the opportunities are so big. It's not just about like getting a second faster than the other person in sort of action sports. It's so broad. We can do so many things together if we want to go in the same direction.
And do you feel you can push brands that you work with on this? Steer them in the direction that you feel that is the appropriate direction to go in? Or do you get steered by your athletes? He does.
He does, yeah.
Well, the thing with Picture, it's great because within the very identity of Picture, it's to be an environmental company. Well, this is in their DNA, and so I knew how much truth is to this or not, I didn't know, entering the company. I couldn't look behind the curtains, but I knew I could always call them out on it. They couldn't get away with it because this is what they claim to be. So this is a great starting point for me as well, because I knew I wanted to be in that space in social and environmental endeavors. This is where I see my future, and I wanted the right partner for it. And I knew I need people like Picture that see themselves the same way. And if I feel like this is bullshit sometimes, I will address it. And it's a great place to be together.
I think with all our athletes, our starting discussions are always about our expectations around social and environmental, but that's not to put ourselves in a higher up position. It's just that's a great starting point, but it means come to us with anything, be open, challenge us, let's grow together and have an actual partnership. And I think that allows athletes to be less scared when they're putting something related to climate or social out, because they feel like we have their back.
So we started here talking about how it's changed, like how we've seen this change recently and brands working with athletes more there. When we look back, we were talking earlier about the last sort of 15 years, how we've gone from pure athletes to athlete content creators to athlete influencers to athlete advocates. That this is obviously a developing trend. In the ideal world, where would you like to see it be in 5, 10 years' time?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it's been really exciting, and like the sport that I'm in, mountain biking, has developed massively in the last 15 years as it is. And it does really feel like times are changing, as they should. We can't just think about our sport anymore. We have to think about the environment the sport is taking place in and the people that rely on that sport as well in kind of rural communities where people being able to do outdoor activities is super important. So yeah, there does feel like there's a shift to more awareness in what brands are talking about and how we're getting involved and what NGOs we're supporting, how you can use the platform that sport has to do good. I think that probably is like the main takeaway for me. There's a much more kind of intentional thinking. What can we be doing? What should we be doing? And
so we've got time for Q&A. Has anyone got just a quick addition to that? Would be
maybe to that point. I think it's interesting where we come from. So my parents told me when they went out ski touring, they put tape over the brand of their skis because they were embarrassed that it was like some branded skis that are very expensive. That was that time, whatever, 70s. Now we've had the time in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s as well, where it was all about brands and consumerism. That was all most of the values there were really. It was not political. And now it's come to a point where it's all political, but brands are catching up and are positioning themselves. Fair enough, we need to position ourselves, I believe. And so what I think now is there's no sticker being put over a brand, but the brand is chosen by the values they have. And that's, I think, the difference that we're seeing. And that's the difference also we're seeing in sort of the athletes that are going to represent brands and the way that brands are positioning themselves. And I think that's I believe, a good development because it becomes a point of competition, and the ones that are just greenwashing are going to be washed out. So I like this idea that brands are taking more responsibility.
Yeah, I would add that we're here with outdoor athletes on the stage, but there's so many different types of athletes out there, and some of the biggest in the world are football stars, tennis stars, and so on. So I'd like to see what that conversation looks like outside of our little bubble, and what conversation a Nike athlete is having with the Nike brand and taking the tools that we've learned here and applying it to other sports, which is why one of our picture athletes, Matt, he wrote a letter that was, raising this exact point, like what should athletes expect out of their brands and how to start this conversation. And I think that would be important to kind of get out of this room and into football stadiums, into tennis courts, and so on.
And just one super quick bit of that, is that letter, that's still the Athlete Tribune, is that still open for signatures?
Yeah.
So
if
athletes in the room or brands in the room that work with athletes, that's something that check with Gillian about afterwards, and that's something that's still available for people to sign on to.
I mean, I think that within paddle sports is a pretty strong realization that our sport itself is under threat, and that it echoes in snow sports as well, with there being less snow. And it's not necessarily out of a selfish desire for us to be able to paddle, or maybe it is to some extent, but we understand that our whole recreation is under threat because of the damage that's happening to the environment and the climate. So this means that our ambassadors are happy to talk about it, and we obviously know that it's essential for our business and our company and our entire sporting community that this is something we're behind. So I don't necessarily see the recent transition from, athlete to content creator to influencer to activist as the end, but I definitely see it as this is the most important topic that we need to be looking at right now, and that's why it's becoming a conversation not just for brands, but for our athletes and for our entire community that enjoys time on the water.
So it brings it from purpose to actually, in the end of the day, if you look at it bluntly, everybody's bottom line depends on this as well, your income as an athlete and your income as a brand. I think that makes the business case for it as much as the purpose case.